Welcome to the Haven Collective. I'm J.R. Foresteros, and this is the Beacon Bit. Today we're investigating the story of the golden calf, which is in Exodus 32. If statistics are to be believed, by this point in the new year, about 80% of us have, we'll say, stopped working on our resolutions, because I don't want to say that we failed at them, right? But that's what they tell us, is that by the end of the first month of the year, about 80% of New Year's resolutions are no longer active. Is that a nice way to say it? Yeah. And I think that's interesting because it's such a cultural phenomenon. For the last at least couple of weeks of the year, people are saying, hey, are you doing any New Year's resolutions? What does that look like? It's all kinds of social media posts and articles about what kind to make and how to make them stick and all of that. And yet, the vast majority of us also know that we're just not going to carry through with them. And that doesn't seem to stop the drive to do it. I find that fascinating because I think that it reveals that deep down we really want to change. We really believe change is possible. Otherwise, we wouldn't engage in this pointless ritual over and over and over again. I also want to suggest that not being able to maintain the resolution, not being able to maintain the change, is actually part of the human condition. It's something that we find really normal when we are attempting any kind of change. And I think that goes whether we're individual or we're talking about a societal change. Exodus 32, the story of the Israelites worshiping the golden calf, is actually, I think, a really clear and powerful illustration of why this is. To set the stage, Moses has gone up onto Mount Sinai to receive the entirety of the Torah. He's already come back with the Big Ten, right? But now he's gone back to kind of, well, let's say, get the finer print, right? The rest of the law, the instruction, the way that God has for God's people. And Moses has been gone a long time. And before we get too harsh with the Israelites, I want you to just imagine that the screen went black right now, and the camera is still rolling, right? But all of a sudden, I just wasn't there. You couldn't see me or hear me. How long would you wait before you checked to see how much time was left in the video, or whether or not there was a connection mistake? How long would you wait before you scrubbed forward until you could see my picture again, right? And that's with a really easy, sort of on-demand technology. What Moses said to Israel was, hey, I'll be right back. And then he went up the mountain, and then he just didn't come back. And by the way, the top of the mountain, Exodus tells us, was on fire the whole time. So it's not like they could see a nice resort up there where he just got waylaid. Eventually, the people get really anxious and afraid because, remember, they've left everything they know, and now they're out in a desert, in a wilderness. They have no long-term plan. Moses was their long-term plan, and as far as they know, that guy is a marshmallow at this point, being smoked into a holy s'more. And so they're afraid. They go to Aaron and they demand that Aaron build a god for them. And so Aaron collects a bunch of precious metals and he fashions into all of these precious metals, he fashions them into a golden calf. Now, again, this is where a lot of times we like to get on our high horses about idolatry and all this kind of stuff. But what we miss here is that what Aaron did was sort of the exact thing that you would expect someone to do in those religions of the day, because you could not interact directly with the gods, and so that's why they had the statues, or what we call the idols, right? They were a physical representation of the god. You couldn't engage with a god, you couldn't interact with a god unless you had a statue of that god, an idol of that god. That's how everyone did it. That's how the Egyptians did it. That's how the Canaanites did it. That's how the Babylonians did it. That was what religious technology looked like in the day. And so what Moses had done when he brought the Ten Commandments down, and that one that said don't make any idols, right, was he was introducing this radical new way of religion, this change that would fundamentally alter the entire course of human history, we know now from our vantage point, like 3,000-ish years later. They didn't know that at the time. All they know is that Moses, who again could do a lot of really impressive stuff, had brought them this stuff that didn't even really make sense to them. Why wouldn't you build an idol if you're going to worship God? That's how you worship God, right? Then he left, and then he never came back, and he didn't really tell them how long they were expected to wait. So because of their deep fear, they reverted to the way of being religious that they understood. And they broke the commandments that they had just agreed to, but it wasn't out of a lack of religiosity. It was actually sort of the opposite. It was because they fell back into the way that they knew how to be religious. They couldn't trust that this new thing that God was doing was really going to protect them, specifically because of all of the uncertainty surrounding their immediate circumstances. That is what I find fascinating. When we are changing, particularly when the change is difficult or scary or hard, it's because we're going into something we've never done before. Maybe it's a new habit that we've never had, a new group of friends, a new place that we're moving or something like that. Any kind of change into the unknown, is really scary. And so we have this tendency to, when we get stressed, when our fear response is activated, when things don't go exactly perfectly, we revert to what we know. I've seen this for years and years and years as my time as a pastor. When I was a youth pastor, other youth pastors would complain about summer camp syndrome, where these kids would go to summer camp and they'd have this dramatic religious experience, and then they'd come back and within about 2 weeks, they'd go back to acting the way they were before. And they'd always complain that it was a fake, summer camp created this fake experience. And I thought to myself, I don't know that that's what it is. I think that when we go into these special places like the top of a Mount Sinai or something, or a summer camp or something like that, we can have these intense experiences of change. We go from being a square peg to a round peg, for instance. But when we come back home, nothing has changed, right? All of our circumstances are the same, and there's not a round hole now waiting for us. There's now a square hole. And it takes, I think, usually about 2 weeks of trying to be different and nothing else in our lives being different before we revert to saying, it's easier to just stay untransformed. That's why 80% of our New Year's resolutions take about a month to wear off, right? Because we just get to the point where it's easier to go backwards. It's easier not to take on the burden and the stress of change. And again, we're not usually reverting back to something bad. That's not, in the Israelites' mind, that's not what they were doing, was not a bad thing, right? They were building, in fact, we have some evidence that specifically the bull, the calf, was how Yahweh was worshipped in Canaanite religion. So what they were doing was, in their mind, not trying to worship some fundamentally other god. They were trying to treat God the way that they treated every other god, and the way that everyone treated all these other gods. And what God was trying to show them was that I am not like the gods that you knew in Egypt. I'm not like the gods of the Babylonians or the Canaanites. I am not like these oppressive, restrictive, constrictive gods. I am a God of liberation. I am a God whose image is not found in statues made of metal or wood. I am a God whose image is found in the humans that are around. And that is specifically why your enslavement by the Egyptians was something that I intervened to stop, because it's immoral to treat anyone who bears my image that way. All of this was so radical that the Israelites could not wrap their minds or their hearts or their spirits around it. And so they reverted to what they knew, what felt safe. That was what the sin was. I look forward to talking about how difficult change is for us and what some of the barriers we encounter are. Because I think if we're serious about the good news of Jesus transforming us, this epiphany, it's what we need to take seriously. I'll look forward to having those conversations in our beacons on Sunday. Until then, grace and peace go with you.